Okay, let's start. So, welcome everybody to this session. Before I introduce myself, I would like to share with you briefly on the why I'm here today and talking about this important topic. So, we all know this famous quote, "The only constant in life is change," right? And that's true for businesses and organizations also. So organizations have always had a need, and always will have a need to change. Of course, because they operate in an environment that is changing constantly. So when we talk about changes in the environment, we talk about changes in the market, changes on the competition, new competition, and so on. Customers, their behaviors, problems, and needs, and so on. So there will always be a need to change. Of course, all of these efforts are, the purpose of those efforts is to succeed and survive in ever-changing environment in which they operate. So the thing is that in today's fast-paced and complex world, this is even more true today. So we always see organizations changing their processes, tools, responsibilities, roles. They're restructuring, they're reorganizing. We have digital transformations, agile transformations, and so on. So in today's fast-paced world, it's even more important to learn how to change, because change is inevitable. And this is really important for organizations to grow internal capabilities on how to do change, because that's the only way that they really can become fit for future and be ready for what the future has in store for them. So my name is Nino Zeljko. I work as an Agile Coach in a company called Kroz, which is a custom software development company based in Zagreb, Croatia. And I started my career right after college in Kroz as a software developer. So during my 10 years as a software developer, I was working on all kinds of different projects and different technologies, different clients, and so on. And at 2011, I found myself working in a Scrum team. And that was really a life-changing, career-changing experience for me, eye-opening. I found out that there is a better way that we can do, and that we can do better. So I got drawn into this common sense world of Agile, which I didn't see used in practice a lot. For the last 8 years, I've been working as an Agile Coach, which means that I deliver trainings, trying to raise awareness in the community and work with individuals, teams, management, and organizations, trying to help them become more agile. Organizational change is a huge topic. I'm sure you all have your own experiences, ideas, and views on that topic. I'm here today to present my view on that, which comes out from my own experience doing agile transformations with clients, and of course also what I learned from others. I could go on about this topic for hours. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time. So my goal for today is to give you an overview of the empirical approach to doing change, some of the tools and practices I found useful, to show you a couple of real-life examples, and hopefully we can have enough time for your questions at the end. Of course, all of these slides with examples are going to be available for you after the session, so you can take a deeper and more detailed view about that. So, through my experience doing agile transformations with clients, I've observed mostly the same pattern when facing a change. So, and that is designing the solution, a static blueprint of the end state of the organization, developing a plan to execute, and then running a project to implement those changes, and then we're done. Well, of course, that's one way to do it. It's probably not the best one. So, first of all, there is no end state, as the change is continuous, right? So we should focus more on how to do those changes, because real agility is about that, right? Learning how to adapt to the environment and having that capability. So agility is a capability, not an end state. Learning how to do change is even more important than the change itself, because we're going to do that a lot. On the right side, you can see Knevin. I'm assuming that you're familiar with Knevin, sense-making framework from David Snowden. If you're not, I strongly encourage you to learn more about it. The key point here I want to make is there are some situations and some systems that are complicated, that behave in a predictable and repetitive way, and others that don't. So, machines are complicated. A computer, a car, they have many components that interact with each other, but always in a predictable and repetitive way. On the other hand, traffic is complex. We can't really predict what will happen in traffic, and it doesn't behave repetitively, because it has many components that are interconnected and interdependent, and do not really influence each other in always predictable ways. So what we do in traffic is basically we keep our eyes open, observing the environment and doing continuous inspection and adaptation to figure out what we need to do. And it's not really predictable, and you can't really record your drive from home to work and the next day just press play and expect to get to work safely, because the system has changed in the meantime. So what we're doing while driving is basically we're using an empirical approach, which is based on transparency and continuous inspection and adaptation. So figuring out that organizations are not machines. Organizations are living organisms, complex systems made of humans and human networks. We need to understand that organizational change is a complex problem, and we need to have different approach to solving those problems. So we need to move away from doing upfront planning and projects and switch to using an empirical approach where we acquire learning through the process, and that in that way increase our chances of success. For an empirical approach to work, really the crucial thing is the transparency. So transparency is not only about being open, seeing everything, but also understanding the system. How can we better understand the system and the context we are in? And our goal as coaches really should be not only helping our clients with agile transformations, adopting Scrum or Kanban or so on, but also helping them learn how to do changes. In other words, instead of driving our clients where they want to go, we need to help them learn how to drive so they can go anywhere on their own. So let's take a look at the empirical approach. Of course, empirical approach is all about short PDCA cycles, right? So plan, do, check, act. So we plan our first step, we do it, and then we inspect and adapt, right? We check what the result, acquire a learning, and act on that and embed that learning into our next steps. But before we do that, the first crucial step is shared understanding. So we need to build the foundation first of shared understanding, and that's especially true in agile transformations, where we have a lot of new words, roles, frameworks, tools, different way of thinking, new concepts, paradigms, and so on. So it's really critical that we start with training and education to build that shared understanding and shared glossary as a foundation for our next steps. This is something that I learned from experience, and really think that this is the crucial first step, regardless of prior knowledge and prior education, that we do have trainings and education. That's not to say that I'm the only one with the right view of things, but we need to understand each other. So we need to build shared understanding, whatever that is, in order to go further. So, to navigate complexity, there are a couple of things that we need to focus on and understand. So first of all, where do we want to go? Where we currently are, what we think might get us there, what do we need to do, and how do we know if we're moving in the right direction? So those are the 5 crucial things in navigating complexity. Of course, when we talk about an empirical approach, a Scrum Framework is a great way to implement one. And it enables really fast learning and discovery what we need in these situations. So in Scrum, we have customer needs. We talk about customer needs. In this context, we talk about organizational needs. Stakeholders are basically the organization, right? The people in the organization, the board, employees, management, middle management, and so on. The product is basically the organization. So a product goal is organizational goal, and product backlog is a list, ordered list of change initiatives, outcomes that we try to achieve in order to reach the goal. The developers are basically the leadership team. You can call it any way you want, transformation team or whatever, but it's important to have a leadership team to drive those changes. So what about the product owner and a Scrum Master in this team? Well, it would be a good thing, it's really a good thing to have something like a product owner in a leadership team. Someone who really understands the organization goal, problems and needs, who can set the direction, make decisions, and so on. So that's really useful to have in a leadership team. The Scrum Master is a little bit more difficult from my experience, as I work with clients who are new in Agile, so they don't have really experienced Scrum Masters. And on this level, when you drive a big change like an Agile transformation, you want top management to be in that team. So you need an experienced Scrum Master, and that's a little bit more difficult to find. So usually I take on that role and facilitate and help the leadership team in our work sessions. When we talk about an increment in Scrum, that's basically the organizational version. So how the organization is operating. And each increment is another version of the organization. Regarding the sprint length, it really depends on what we are doing and the context. So it shouldn't be longer than 1 month. And depending on the dynamics and what we are doing, I find that 2-week sprints work really well, especially when we are doing experiments with teams who are also using 2-week iterations. So there's a lot of learning and discovery going on, and that's a good fit. So a leadership team consists really of change agents who lead and have ownership of the change initiatives. When we talk about organization as a complex system, those changes are rarely localized. So when you touch some part of the organization, it has an effect on other parts of the organization. So really, what kind of members do you want in a leadership team is people who have power and reach in the organization. Of course, working in a leadership team on change initiatives is not really a 1-hour monthly status reporting meeting, and you need to invest more time. So you want people who are who have buy-in and are ready to invest time for working in such a team. Of course, we want the team to be cross-functional or multifunctional, basically having members of the team from different domains who have different experiences, different views, so it enables the whole team to have a bigger picture. So people from HR or people and culture, finance, marketing, business, IT, so on. When it comes to agile transformation, it's really important for the leadership team to experience the change. So trainings and education is just a start. It's not enough. So we should focus on helping them acquire their own experiences, empirical knowledge, from by learning, by doing, and really set up the leadership team to work as an agile team and to lead by example. That has many benefits. It also shows the other people in the change process that they're not doing something to others, they're doing it to themselves also. And working as an agile team enables them to better understand the changes that other people are going through. Of course, making working agreements about purpose of this team, how they are going to work, what are the expectations to work in this team, and so on. Of course, we want them to visualize the work like all agile teams and have that transparent to the rest of the organization. That enables two-week feedback loops, a contribution from other sides, challenging some assumptions, and really getting on board with the rest of the people. And of course, implementing feedback loops, right? So it's really essential that the leadership team is in the change process, having feedback loops with the people in the change process so they can acquire learning, help with removing impediments, and figure out what the next steps should be. When we talk about goals, we're talking about really understanding where we want to go. So Valerio mentioned how you should think about goals not as outputs, but as outcomes. So I couldn't agree more. So in this context, goals are business goals, and we're looking for outcomes, what kind of impact we want to make, not just output. So for example, having 10 agile teams until the end of the year is not really a good goal. So we want the goals to be clear and simple so that people can understand them, build shared understanding and align on them. And it's essential for the goals to have success and fail criteria. So we understand if we reach the goal or not. So we are talking about some metrics, hard metrics, soft metrics, it's a good thing to think about metrics in the sense of leading and lagging indicators. So leading indicators are something that tells us we are on the right track, but we haven't achieved the goal yet, and lagging indicators tell us if we achieved the goal. So for example, if we are trying to increase the quality of our product, a leading indicator would be how many bugs we can catch before we release something to production. That's a really good thing, but it doesn't represent really success, right? So a lagging indicator in this context would be number of problems reported from the production. And of course, it always helps to split bigger goals into smaller ones, as it enables us for a shorter feedback loop and better understanding. Smaller goals are more easier to understand, to get aligned on, and so on. When we talk about goals, we usually focus on the mechanics too much, and we lose sight of the culture. So it's important to focus more on culture, because when we set goals, we employ some processes, tools, and responsibilities and roles to help us reach those goals and to drive actions which will get the results, right? But the underlying bottom of the results pyramid is something that we skip, and that's the culture. So a culture is really important because we talk about a complex system of organization with humans, and humans act on their beliefs which come out from their experiences in the organization. Once I had a workshop with the board, and during the break, one of them shared a story how he was frustrated and agitated, how he found out that day that one of the projects that was really important was late and all kinds of problems, so basically in red, right? For 4 months. And he only found about it today. It so happens that a couple of days earlier, I was talking to a manager in that organization, and he shared a story with me of one of the board meetings with 30 managers, status reporting meeting on projects, how they're proceeding, and so on. And you can imagine one of the managers reporting problems and delays on a project, and in his words, the board mopped the floor with him. And it was really an unpleasant experience for the rest of the managers there. So I'm saying this as a reminder to think about, if you're aiming for transparency, what kind of experiences are you really delivering to your employees in the organization? So focusing on culture is really important when doing change. Another thing that's really important is systems thinking, and we should use that more often. So systems thinking is basically looking at the whole picture, the whole system, and trying to understand which part of the system are influencing other parts of the system in a positive or a negative way. It's really easy to get lost in the details and so on, but we are not really looking for details. We are trying to find crucial factors in the system that are influencing each other and focus on them in order to be more successful in change. For example, if you want distributed decision-making and empowered individuals and empowered teams, what influences that? Well, probably something like having clear goals, building trust between stakeholders and the team, having clear boundaries on what the team decisions can be about and which decisions the team cannot make, and so on. So having that way of approach is really useful into increasing our chances of success. And of course, when we talk about goals, we seek clarity, right? We don't want fuzzy goals. We want them to be clear. We want to challenge and drill buzzwords. Keep in mind, same words have different meanings, and it's really important to catch those and to clarify and build a shared understanding around those, and ask stupid questions and be curious. Don't be afraid to do that, because sometimes it really changes the perspective and introduces new insights that are crucial to your efforts. Push for concreteness. So don't be afraid to really push people to be as concrete as they can when they define goals. So ask questions like, how would you know that something happened? How would you know that you succeeded? What could you observe? And so on. And of course, always when we are working on something, we build in a lot of assumptions. So focus on catching and identifying those assumptions and make them explicit and challenge those and to have a conversation, because probably this is something that you need to take into account also. Here are some of the tools I found useful in this context. Here's an Agile strategy map, and the concept is really simple. You defined a business goal, like we want to increase our customer base for 20%, for example. And then we brainstorm about hypotheses, what we think might get us closer to that goal. These hypotheses are called possible success factors, or PSFs for short. So one example would be like creating new free services would attract people to our platform, and we will increase our number of paying customers. That's a hypothesis that we need to really validate first. Out of those hypotheses come the necessary conditions. What do we need to have in order to validate that hypothesis? So, for example, we need at least one new free service to be able to validate if this attracts customers to our platform. So we devise experiments, safe-to-fail experiments, to validate PSFs. And once we do validate that, it becomes a critical success factor. So this is one tool that I like to use, and these are a couple of examples from the real life. Usually it is a workshop with the leadership team, one-day workshop mixed with education and training, to understand what we are doing, why we are doing that, and how are we going to do that. And then we have the brainstorming sessions in order to get that output. In this example, I would like to show you, for example, this bottom PSF has a lot of necessary conditions. So it probably makes sense to split that into smaller ones, because it might take a long time to validate something like this. So how can we split that into smaller pieces in order to get that feedback faster? Of course, once we have the necessary conditions, out of those come out really actionable items like tasks that we need to do in order to prepare for the experiment and to validate the PSF. And of course, these tasks have owners, and we track their progress and make sure that everything is going according to our wishes. Another tool is objectives and key results. I don't have much experience with that, and I'm going to look to change that in the future, because I like OKRs, because they really make you focus on objectives and measurable outcomes as key results. And it's really useful. I like it because those key results become the objectives for other parts of the organization who have their own key results on how to achieve that. And it really makes it easy to align across the organization from top to bottom on goals, and so to ensure that we are all going in the same direction. This is one example of an output of a conversation that I had with the leadership team at one company. So this is just a glimpse of what we were talking about. What I wanted to share with you here is the outcome that came out from that. So we started drilling on one of their goals, and it's a pharma industry, so it's non-IT related. So developing new and complex products. So what influences our ability to do that? And during the conversation, we identified some things like we need skills and competencies development. Okay, so what influences that? Well, we need to identify knowledge gaps on projects. And how can we do that is by, for example, improving the portfolio system to include identifying knowledge gaps. The outcome of that was the leadership team saying that this is not in their scope. So these are something, as I mentioned before, when we do changes in complex systems like organizations, they are not localized. So the outcome of this conversation was really to talk about the purpose of the leadership team and what is their role in driving the organizational goals. So it's really useful. Assessment, of course, sometimes it makes sense, depending on the context, to start with the assessment first, before we talk about goals, right? However, I think it's a good thing to always at least start first with a conversation about goals to better understand what we need to assess, right? So when we do an assessment, we want to really understand where we currently are, and it's really useful to have different perspectives when we do that. So outside in or inside out. So for example, inside the organization or outside of organization, or when we talk about teams, inside the team and outside the team. So we talk about workshops with people to understand really what do we want to assess, right? We can't assess everything. We want to focus on crucial things. Interviews are a really good method for doing this. So when I talk about interviews, I talk about the interviews with people in the organization, and we want variety of those. So, for example, the hierarchy, we want the top layer from the CEO all the way down to employees, but also from different parts of the organizations and who work in different contexts. OrgScan is a tool to assess the culture in the organization, and I'm going to show you briefly an example of that. But you can use many different things here. I like static. That's really useful. Also something that I will share with you. But you can use Agile Fluency Model, SWOT analysis, or whatever. It's all about raising transparency and discovering things, right? What are the challenges and opportunities in front of us? So we can seek alignment on that and agree on what our picture currently is and what would be some of the possible next steps. I'm not sure why this is so white, but when you download the slides, it won't be like this. But okay, so this is a static-based workshop that I did on a team level. So first, we did this inside out, with the team, and then after that, we invited the stakeholders of the team to really talk about these topics and get alignment on that. So that's really interesting and useful thing to do, to compare these two perspectives and align on them. So topics like current challenges or opportunities, what is the purpose of the team, who are your customers, what are you delivering, what the quality means for this team, who are your stakeholders, what do you expect from them, what they expect from you, how are you currently working, how are you managing work, and so on. OrgScan is basically a tool developed by Cognitive Edge and Agile 42, and it enables you to assess the culture in the organization and what is really happening in the organization. I really like this tool, and it's based on a concept of stories. So employees enter stories about decisions that get made in the organization, which have some kind of impact on them. And they, of course, there are a lot of parameters that go with the decisions, like who made the decision, how long did it took, how was it communicated, what kind of value drivers were behind making those decisions, and so on. So once we have this stories in the tool, we have a lot of assessment tools for different kind of stuff. So for example, when we talk about empowering Scrum teams, and of course they are empowered and so on, once we have this analysis, we can really show that nothing really changed in the organization by adopting Scrum, because the decisions that the Scrum team makes are mostly operational and no strategic decisions. And then on the other hand, we can see management making a lot of operational decisions for the team. So not really autonomous and empowered. This is an example of a simple SWOT analysis and then confrontation metrics where we put together these strengths, weaknesses, threats and opportunities to see what influences what, so we are better able to understand what our first steps would be, what to focus on. But also I did simple spider webs in the areas that the team wishes to assess itself and try to improve. So you can use the simple tools like that. So pilots and experiments are all about how we might get there. We want to create a safe-to-fail environment for the experiments, and the purpose of the experiment is to validate ideas and hypotheses. So it's essential that we stress out that the people inside the experiment need time for learning and discovering and experimenting. It's useful to have the same experiment in different contexts, so you can see how it works in different contexts. Of course, splitting, again, to reduce cost of learning, and there's always some preparation activities that you need to do in order to start an experiment. So this is not really a phase where you impose solutions and frameworks. We would like to have options here to investigate. And the leadership team, it's essential to be in contact with the experiment, to enable the fast learning, help with impediments removal, and we want that continuous feedback and two-way communication. And of course, to be able to understand the results and review the experiment and decide on the next steps. I talked about the metrics. It's really important for the experiment also to have success or fail criteria. You can use any metrics you can think of, like NPS, lead cycle times, whatever you want. And then after that, we want to create the improvement backlog with the experiments, change initiatives, and tasks that we need to do in order to start running those experiments, set the time box for the experiment, and align on expectations. So a good practice is to have a kickoff at the start of the experiment with all the people involved to build that shared understanding and alignment. I could probably survive without this slide because it's filled with confidential data, but I wanted just to show you the structure of an experiment. So things like what are the challenges, consequences, hypotheses, what is the goal, what kind of metrics and options we have, how are we going to review that, what kind of learnings are coming out of that experiment, and so on. This is something that I call an improvement canvas about our OrgScan engagement, which was pretty low at one client, so we tried to figure out what to do about it in the next cycle. And it's pretty similar to the previous example. Another thing that you can use is the experiment canvas. I like here because it's really lightweight and it focuses on also on amplifying actions and dampening actions. So preparing for if we are successful or not, where are we going to do that? This is an example from real life. I wanted to share with you here a simple tool like Google Forms, where you create a questionnaire to have some kind of soft metrics. So how are we managing work? It's a questionnaire from 1 to 5. It's subjective, but it's not really about absolute values. It's really about the trends. So you make an assessment before the experiment, after the experiment, and you can get some input on these things. An improvement backlog is, of course, owned by the leadership team. We want to visualize the change initiatives, the experiments and activities to enable that continuous two-way communication and contribution from others. Use flight levels concepts here to focus on strategic and coordination and operational level. That's really useful to have in these kind of situations. Of course, we don't want to have too many change initiatives running at the same time, so we need to focus somehow. And the same techniques with product backlog always help here, like impact, effort, cost of delay, and so on. And we want really to create early wins and catch those low-hanging fruits to create engagement with the people that are going through changes and put effort in those to really show them that their efforts have meaningful outcomes. Here you can see a Kanban board for the improvement backlog. Like we have phases of ideas and challenges, then we refine them and create the improvement canvas, which are ready. Then we select some that we want to start with, select the options with which we want to start, and then create tasks that we need to do and review them regularly. This is the same example on a team level. And this is one Kanban board in IT department where the management wanted to show this board is what they're doing for their employees. So this board is hanging on the wall in the IT department in an open space where 50 people work. And this is the backlog of the management and what are they doing. So they really had meetings at this board with stakeholders. Anybody could join in and listen and contribute after that, have a conversation. So this is really a nice example of transparency. And in the end, I would like to come back to the first slide and this famous quote: "The only constant in life is change, and we really need to master how we do changes, because this is the only way we can prepare for uncertain future and whatever it brings to us." Here are some of the resources that you can start digging around if you're interested more about some topics that I mentioned. And that's it. Thank you for listening.